Next speaker, I follow on Twitter because he's an animal. He's the head of user experience design at SunTrust, Andy Vitale.
I will. I have to. Fuck it, man. All right, now, of course, right? So, I get the privilege of speaking after 2 lunch periods. Wonderful. You guys are a little zoned out. I don't care. Let's get up. Get up for a second. Let's stand up for a second. Seriously, if I'm standing, you're standing, we're all standing, we're going to have a good time. All right. Just a quick question, show of hands. How many of you are not actually UX designers? Holy shit. What do you do? Just someone, just yell it out. All right. Yeah, nice. I heard actually none of that because it all came at once, but I get it. If you could just raise your dominant hand for me, I would really appreciate it. Right hand, left hand, and we're going to see who's who. All right, so I ask that you look to the person to the left and the right of you. If there's someone on that side, if you're on the edge, look behind you. Let's get some fucking high fives going around, man. Seriously, like, let's get up for lunch. All right, everybody gets this back down. I appreciate that. So it really is nice to be back in St. Louis. The last time I was here, I was at a food safety conference, and compared to a design conference, I was probably asleep the whole week. But anyway, I'm going to tell you a quick story about me. How many of you know who this is? All right, so if you don't, that is Bat Boy. Bat Boy is a fictional character created by the Weekly World News. Basically, there was a fine piece of literature that came out a while back, and they just put fictional stories on supermarkets, and I worked for that company. And, you know, I'm not that proud of that, but you know what? We also put out great pieces of work like this. The National Enquirer, The Sun, The Star, The Globe, Weekly World News, pretty much every piece of crap magazine that you've seen in the newsstand, we did it. The reason I'm telling you that story is while I was working there, we were the first anthrax attack in the United States. This was in 2001. We were in Boca Raton, Florida, and we got a package mailed to us with a picture of J-Lo and a soapy substance. And our photo editor opened it and ended up with inhalation anthrax. Now at the time, the company didn't know that's how it happened. They sent out a lot of information around, well, you know, he was in a stream in North Carolina and it's probably not contagious and everything should be fine. The next day, I'm working at my desk and somebody in a hazmat suit is swabbing my desk. And I'm like, this is weird. But they're like, it's precautionary, don't worry about it. I went home for the weekend. My dad called me up. He said, hey, your company's on the news. You need to go down to the health department. It's like, what? So I went down to the health department. The first thing they say is, we need you to sign this paper saying that you're not going to sue us, and we're going to treat you because we found anthrax in the building. Around the same time, maybe a day or two different, the photo editor died of anthrax. And then they sat us down in a hotel ballroom in Delray Beach, Florida. And I remember it. It was the FBI, the CDC, the Florida Department of Health. They sat us down and they said, we honestly don't know what's going to happen to you. We can't tell you if you're going to live or die. Like, that's great news, right? I freaked out. But we know that anthrax, there was an anthrax outbreak in Russia in the 60s, and we know that the spores stay dormant for 58 days. So we're going to give you 60 days of medication and monitor you regularly. Okay, so I got my nasal swab. They called me back. They said, hey, you know what? You're good. You're clear. Wonderful. Special alert tone on the news. Another one of my coworkers had anthrax. So they call back the next day and say, you know what? The tests are inconclusive. We're going to have to come back and do it again. This happened for about 6 weeks before we realized that we were in the clear. And then they offered us vaccinations and all sorts of things that I didn't take advantage of. So the reason I tell that story is that was the point in time that I realized that communication was wrong, was bad, The impact of bad communication causing people to have panic attacks, freak out, people were dying, we didn't know what was going on. Everybody like freaked out every time we heard the special alert tone on the news. We would gather together, like we became really close at the time through this. But it was really odd. So after that, I decided that at some point in my career, when I get the opportunity to, I really want to be able to like solve problems that are impacting people, because I felt like this was a need that wasn't being met. Or I just didn't think design was in that position at the time. So again, this was back in 2001. I didn't have that opportunity directly to impact people until about 5 years ago. So about 5 years ago, I ended up working at a company called 3M. And that's what brought me here for the food safety conference. So 3M doesn't just make scotch tape and post-it notes. 3M does a lot of stuff for healthcare. So I started out working on medical devices. So just to show of hands, how many of you have worn or know somebody that has worn braces? Okay, 3M creates braces. A lot of orthodontic products also. How many of you know someone or have ever used an inhaler before? Okay, 3M created an inhaler, the first inhaler. Since then, I worked on a display for a smart inhaler that hasn't come out yet, of course, regulatory in healthcare. I ended up working on healthcare software, so basically enterprise software for healthcare. 3M has about 80% market share of clinical data, at least in that space for inpatient and outpatient encounters. So we got to work on something really cool that just got DMI Design Value Award called Performance Matrix, which is a partnership with Google to find improper quality of care or excess expenditures in hospitals. After that, I ended up being the Director of Design Impact for AIGA Minnesota, and Sustainable Design and Design for Good fell under me. And right now I'm currently at SunTrust, where I started out as the Director of Wholesale Banking, and then quickly transitioned into the Head of UX Design. Sorry, thirsty. I ate almost a whole Emo's pizza before. So, anyway.
And toasted ravioli.
And toasted ravioli. Seriously. Like 8 of them. So, ultimately, what drew me to SunTrust is to understand people's relationship with money and how it affects people and how it keeps people up at night, and figuring out an opportunity to help educate people and help them grow in financial confidence. Of course, a lot of the products that we were working on were put on hold because we're going through a merger. I heard somebody mention Truist before. Yes, that is the name of the new company. We are not that company yet. Hopefully sometime soon. I have a new role at Truist. I'll be building a new team focused on strategic design and innovation, so I'm really excited about that and the opportunity that it has. But enough about me. Let's talk about design. So, no matter where you are in your career, it's a privilege when you're in a position that you can really make a difference. When you have the opportunity to do so, that impact is inspiring. It's all about making a positive impact as a designer. It's about leaving things better than we found them. So, designers should really recognize that there's always a path to improve the current state. And to do so through a meaningful context really showcases the power of design. And it's not, there's really this exponential impact, right? By choosing to be a designer, you're choosing to impact people. And you're choosing to impact the people that come into contact with your work. And you can either help them or hurt them with your actions. And whatever we work on, the tools, the products, the services, the solutions, we have the opportunity to really make this impact that does grow and grow with the people that use it, whether it's functional, emotional, or currently in my case, financial. And the stakes as a designer are higher than ever before, right? We're not just designing screens. We're not just designing a weather app, right? We're designing, does anybody design a weather app in here? I don't want to shit on that right now. Someone's doing that. So we're designing solutions across ecosystems. We're designing organizations. We're solving complex problems for people like we've never had that opportunity to do before. And this privilege or burden is relatively new for designers, right? We've got a lot more power than we ever had before. When we do our job well, it really improves people's lives, but when we don't, we can really fuck with people. The truth is, people want to feel safe and secure. Safety is a basic human right. Unfortunately, there's so much shit going on today that makes people not feel safe. There's breaches, there's improper practices, there's hacks, there's, you name it, it's happening. And it's not just, always the fault of the company. There are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes or that the company doesn't have control over. But the people in the public, they don't understand that. They see that breach and they immediately point to that company. And I'm not saying that these could have been solved by design, but I am saying that people deserve to feel safe. And design can play a part in that. So this is a video, and I don't know if the sound will work. If not, no big deal. So it doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen this before, but somebody, as a prank, created an LCD screen that when you walk on this bridge, it starts to make a cracking sound. Look at where the bridge is. You walk on that, and people are freaking the fuck out, as you would, right? Like, no kidding. Like, whoever as a designer thought, you know what, I'm gonna do this. Like, this is really what, is wrong with design in some effects, right? Like, we do not want to be the one that designs this. And, after a while, they told people it was a prank. And let's take it a step further. So on January 13th at 8:09 a.m., a missile alert went out to the people of Hawaii. Basically said, there's a missile coming, seek shelter, this is not a drill. Imagine that you get this alert on your phone that basically says your life is about to end. Or maybe not, best case scenario, you might survive it. But that is happening. It's imminent. This is not a drill. 38 minutes later, state officials blamed a miscommunication during the drill. The people weren't aware that this was a mistake or that this wasn't going to happen or impact them for 38 minutes. Like, that's almost, if we round up, it's an hour. Imagine thinking for an hour that your life is going to end. It's crazy. And it turns out that this could have been a design issue. It was definitely an organization of information issue. So really, what they wanted to click on was the almost fourth from the bottom, drill-PACOM CDW state only. Actually, no, that's not the one. Maybe test message, I don't know. What would I have clicked on? I know that they did click on the one in the middle. So think about how many times you accidentally send an email, click the wrong file, open up a wrong document. I go to the supermarket and I see my chunky peanut butter, the honey one, and I look at it and I look away, I talk to my wife and I grab it, I put it in the cart, I unpack it when I get home and it's the creamy. And my wife thinks you must have a depth perception problem or something. But the truth is, that's an easy, honest mistake. Someone just clicked the wrong thing accidentally and caused mass hysteria. So Pew Research says that only 50% of Americans feel that technology companies has a positive impact on the United States. This score went down 21% in the last 2 years. And why do we think that is? Well, as a designer, this is a list of new or technologies that were new at some point that were not well understood. But as designers, we didn't have time to figure out what these tools, what this software, what this power, what these technologies could actually do. We had to design in the moment. It's not, hey, I wonder if social media could be damaging to people over time. It's, we need a Twitter account, a Facebook account, and the design for that, and LinkedIn, and all this shit. And then we gotta go to voice, and then virtual reality, and AI is a thing. Let's build a chatbot. Does the chatbot feel real? Nobody has time to figure that out. We just gotta build the fucking thing. That's what they ask us to do. What we really need to do is slow down and measure that the work that we're doing is right, and that we have to understand the potential impacts that it can have, that these technologies have. Because we're learning them in the moment, and we don't have time to really pay attention to what they can do. Speaking of artificial intelligence, like, holy shit, look at this. So Facebook sends you a little friendly reminder that, hey, a year ago you had the most likes on this picture, or this was an important day in your history. Well, imagine if a year ago, or however long ago, your mother died. And then Facebook sends you, hey, this was your most liked photo. Here's this heart. On top of that, here's some dancing characters that are literally dancing on your mother's grave. The truth is, this was designed by humans. We like to say, well, the technology did it. People wouldn't do that. Somebody made the decision for this to happen. Somebody designed the algorithm that controlled this. And at the end of the day, they didn't understand the consequences that it would have had. What we have to understand is that technology by itself doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't understand the context. It doesn't have a soul. Technology is an enabler. And design allows you to apply meaning to the technology. So Alan Cooper said that the individuals who create some of the most oppressive digital systems are mostly good people. It's kind of true. We all create things that we don't know the consequences of. We're doing what we think is good work, seemingly good work, for what makes sense as a good reason. Yet, what we create can actually turn against us. It can be used for the wrong reasons. And we're not always aware of that right off the bat. Spotify's design team talks about there being 3 types of harm. The first one is physical harm. If you think about physical harm that we can induce as designers, think about addictive technology. It keeps people up at night. It affects people's sleep patterns. You know, we've got, how many of you have, well, everybody, never mind. So parallaxing, right? You go to a website and you scroll down and things move at different directions and speeds. I have a friend that every time she sees that, she's got to like take a break because she has bad vertigo. And that triggers it every single time she goes to a site. So every time a designer thinks, wow, this is cool, I'm going to add this shit to my design, somebody's getting sick from it. I mean, that's an edge case, right? But the truth is we need to be aware of those things. There's also accidents, right? People, you know, I took a cab here today from the airport, and my cab driver, first, he's plugging in the address as he's driving. I imagine he knew where it was, but okay, a couple of seconds, not a lot of traffic, no big deal. He took a phone call on the physical phone, like, hello, like, I'm talking, that's fine, it's legal. Then he started to text. Who in this day still texts and drives? Like, I don't know, it's crazy. I used to think because from when cell phones came out, I was driving, and I always drove with a cell phone, so I'm like, oh, you know, texting and driving, I grew up with it. But the truth is, like, it's scary shit. And we create the ability for that to happen. We also can cause emotional damage. That's the betrayal of somebody's trust or privacy. When people get exploited or exposed, you know, it's something that we have control over. We build the platforms that enable this. Suicide rates are higher than I can ever imagine or remember because maybe we're more aware of it, but we're creating these platforms that enable bullying and seeing the consequences of it. And the people that put these in effect are kind of like, you know what, these people, they just need to toughen up a little bit. It's like, no, you shouldn't be enabling this behavior or creating a place for it to happen. Then, of course, we've got societal harm. So this is when we reinforce stereotypes. This is when we polarize people for having different views. We create technology that enables that. So let's talk a little bit about dark patterns. So Harry Bricknell just easily defines dark patterns as dirty tricks to increase conversion rates. It's fall. I love pumpkin spice. Like, it's literally, pumpkin season is my favorite season. So I decided I'm going to go and buy some pumpkin spice beard oil. It's a thing, I swear. So I went to this website because I Googled like pumpkin spice beard oil. And I came across this wonderful site. It told me that 6 were sold in the last 24 hours. So, all right, people are buying it. Well, there's only 75 left. Like, holy shit, I better get this. 10 people are viewing it right now. and the deal expires in 12 hours. I was like, oh, I better buy this before, I don't want anyone else at my job to have pumpkin spice beard oil, so let me beat them to it. I accidentally hit refresh, and all the numbers changed. And it's like, that's not really that big of a thing, but it's a thing. It's a false sense of urgency that are created through a design. So while we're on pumpkin spice season, I also decided to buy pumpkin spice deodorant. Yes, that's a thing too. Not really proud of that, but I bought it. There's a company called Native. And Native is a company that seems like a good company. It's all natural products, like it seems good. So I signed up for Native. The very next minute, I got a spam email. 1, no big deal. The next day, I got like 4. Every day, I got 4. Buy our winter cherry deodorant. Buy our Christmas palooza deodorant. I was like, I can't deal with this shit anymore. It's taking over my inbox. So I went to unsubscribe. And I got this message. If I were to unsubscribe, Muppet would be really sad. I have 2 dogs. I don't want Muppet to be sad. But I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I thought, I screenshot it. That's like, I didn't search for it later. Like, I was kind of weirded out by it. But anyway, so I was like, where would they come up with a pattern like that? Well, like we hear all the time, Facebook did it. They have billions of users now. We can follow that pattern. So there was a time when if you wanted to cancel your Facebook account, you would get a message that said, don't do this, Bridget will miss you. Tom will miss you. You'll never see Joey's 4 kids when they grow up. Look at them, little Terry's in walking around the house now, bumping into things, pulling the cat's tail. Like, I don't want to miss that. Actually, I do. I don't care. But just because Facebook does something does not mean that everyone else should do it. So those are dark patterns, and those can be unethical, but there are a lot worse things that we've done as designers. So just defining ethics through a very reputable source, the dictionary, it said that ethics is the discipline of dealing with what is good or bad, and with moral duty and obligation. It's about, we hear the word ethics thrown around a lot, but how many of you, not by a show of hands, just think to yourself, have your own like moral principles, or personal design beliefs, or just personal beliefs that's like a line in the sand for you? And if you don't have them, think why. Then if we apply that to design, again, I went to the encyclopedia for this, and it's long, so I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll give you like 7 seconds so you can read it. It's basically applying those ethics to design, those morals to design, and understanding the significance or moral worth of the products that come out of it. And what this means is that as designers, we really need to understand the potential consequences of our actions. I know we all have paychecks that at times feel really good, but doing so at the expense of society, affecting the people that we share the planet with in a negative way is wrong. I point out Facebook because they do a lot of stupid shit. In 2014, they ran an experiment on a very small subset of their user base, 600,000 people. And what they did is they just filled up their feeds with bad news to see how people react to it, what kind of effect it had on their mental health. They ran a social experiment with over 500,000 people without their consent, without the opportunity to opt out if for some reason you had a mental health issue. And they just thought it was fine. I don't get it. Which means that sometimes we're faced with this decision of, do we do what's right for our company, or do we do what's right for people? And a lot of times what we have to do is point to our company's values and core principles and make sure that we're tying our design decisions or any decisions back to that. But a lot of times the company loses sight, and it's not always their fault. I mean, it's gotta be their fault, right? Whose fault is it? But really, like, decisions get made and things happen, but somebody has to be the one to point it out. So when we think about potential questions we might have to deal with as designers, this one I hear talked about a lot. It's coming up. It's becoming real. So what if you were asked to design an autonomous vehicle? Let's say it's a Mercedes, so it costs a lot of money. The vehicle is about to crash. It's about to run over a pedestrian. If you're designing the software, you would say, well, the software is going to be intelligent enough, it's going to just stop and avoid the crash. Well, let's say that doesn't happen, or that could cause more damage. Whose life do you save? Do you decide, well, because it's a Mercedes in this example, the driver must have more money. They must be wealthy. They must be worth something to society. We've put a value to them. Let's let them survive and run the person over. Or do you say, because technology is not going to say the driver is an asshole, so we're not going to worry about them. They're going to say, how do we measure this situation quickly? Will we be able to identify how much money somebody has in their pocket? Facially recognize who they are? To decide maybe their life is worth more than the driver's? How do we put a value on that? And these are things that we're going to have to deal with. So, every human being on Earth should strive to do the best to leave the planet, this planet or any other planet, as we start to occupy those, in better shape than we found it. So let's talk about sustainable design. The term design here is used to refer to practices that are applied to how we make products, services, as well as businesses of, innovation strategy. Sustainability is thought of how do we continue this into the future, right? What's the impact of our work on the world's environment, resources, the climate? So how many of you are familiar with play pumps by a show of hands? Okay. So play pumps provided a way for African villages to pump water where they didn't have water, and it sounded like a marketing dream. People like Jay-Z bought into it, record labels, presidents, people really bought into this. Basically, kids play in a playground. As they do, water is pumped from the ground, and it's stored in a tank. Now, forget about the child labor aspect of it. The recommended minimum daily water requirement is 15 liters per person. What this means is these kids would have to play 27 hours a day to get the required amount of water. I know we're all designers and we kind of suck at math, but 27 hours a day is impossible, right? So there are only 24 hours in a day. Anyway, the pumps were expensive. They were $14,000 each. The equipment would break down, be expensive to fix. It turned out, for the cost of one play pump, you can provide 4 conventional wells at the same cost. So why bother with this? It just didn't make sense. So, as designers, we know that we try to learn from our mistakes. The UN published a guide of sustainable goals. I've got a quick video that I'm really going to let it go through because there's no sound. So we'll stop it after we go through all of them. Now what really baffles me as you read this is why they're going to start going out of order. Why start with 17 and not 1? And then go to 12? But seriously, these are all wicked problems and things that we should focus on. And as designers, these are spaces that we really want to play to make a difference. So I applaud them for really going after this. And you can look it up online, UN Sustainable Goals. Then we'll talk about universal design. And this is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people, the greatest extent of people possible, without any need for adaptation or special design. An example of this would be a curb cut. So we see this and we don't even really realize that it's there anymore. Curb cuts were a design decision, we'll call it that make it easier for people to cross the street or get up and down around the street. Now, at first, this was created for people in wheelchairs. But it affects people who push strollers. It affects people who have trouble walking, people who need walking assistance, people who are carrying boxes, people who are moving large amounts of things. And this is basically saying that by trying to start solving for one group of people and being more inclusive in our design, we're making things better for everyone. Then we hear a lot about accessibility now, right? According to the World Bank, approximately 1 billion people worldwide live with disabilities. In the US, it's 1 in 5. That's 20% of our population. And a lot of companies are starting to pay attention to accessibility, and you're hearing it a lot more because they're being sued. Recently, Domino's there was a lawsuit where they were involved, and people can actually sue the companies now if their sites aren't accessible. So Target is one big accessibility case, $6 million lawsuit. Morgan Stanley, $9 million. Wells Fargo, $16 million. But the reason this is happening is because we really need to pay attention for people who have disabilities. And a lot of the products that we use today, every day, were originally created for people who have disabilities. Things like SMS messaging, right? Those were originally developed for people to communicate without a phone, but now we use it through our phone. The telephone itself, Alexander Graham Bell, I think his sister and his mother were both deaf, and he wanted to create some sort of device for hearing, and in turn ended up developing into the telephone. We use audiobooks now. These are great for people who have visual impairments. Everything is controlled by voice today. Even software. We see voice everywhere. The fidget spinner. This was originally created for people who had autism. And then everybody's favorite, the Snuggie, was originally created for people in wheelchairs. You know, there was a talk a few minutes ago about weather. I live in the South now, and it's colder here when I got here than it was when I left. And I was like, I wish I had my Snuggie with me. But it didn't fit in my backpack. So anyway, Apple made a video. I'm not going to play it. Apple was once sued. They're doing a lot around accessibility. Go to their site. It's probably apple.com/accessibility and watch the video of all the cool things they have. And then we also talk about inclusive design. And it sounds like it's so new, but it's almost 15 years old, that term. And it's the design of mainstream products and services that are accessible to and usable by as many people as reasonably possible without the need for special adaptation or specialized design. So, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. This is a soap dispenser. The soap dispenser works if your hand is a light color. If you end up having dark skin, well, good luck using that soap dispenser because it doesn't recognize it. But like anything else, people figure out workarounds. We see it all the time with the solutions that we provide. So if you go ahead and have a black hand and put a white towel underneath it, it will dispense soap. Take the towel away, and it doesn't work. I don't know. I didn't mean to. That isn't good enough anymore. It's 2019. If you don't test with potentially every person that could use your product, if you don't involve them in the design process, if you're not letting them understand the product that you're building and literally use it, seriously, fuck you. Because you don't deserve the right to call yourself a designer. And as designers and as humans, it's our obligation to respect every human being on this planet. Not only the people, but their time, their intentions, their privacy, and their intelligence. That's what we do as designers. Victor Papanek says that you're responsible for what you put into the world. You're responsible for the effects those things have upon the world. So what's the worst that can happen if we just continue to do things the same way? How many of you are familiar with James Leon? James Leon worked at Volkswagen for over 20 years. He was a company man. In 2017, James was sentenced to 40 months in prison for basically designing software, working with software to cheat emissions tests. What this means is that we're being held as people who create products, as designers, at a higher level than ever before. And we can actually suffer consequences. We can go to jail for this shit. We need to ask ourselves and our partners to create responsible guidelines for our products, for our services. So if we talk about the typical design discovery, just to align on terminology, because everybody has a slightly different version of the design process. We're going to identify a problem. We're going to identify some user needs. We're going to understand how people use that product, the problem, whatever we're trying to go after. We're going to understand their workflow. We're going to understand their context. And context is very important. We have to understand how it actually is used. Just a sidebar, when I was at 3M, we were working on software, again, for hospitals, a way for outpatient procedures, also inpatient procedures, for doctors to communicate with the CDI specialist nurses and medical coders. And when we went to visit the different facilities, we saw that people were taking a patient chart, they were Skyping somebody in, not through our software, but Skyping, so that's a violation of PHI. They were taking screenshots and emailing them. It's another violation of PHI. They were printing them up, leaving them out, having conversations around it. Not because they wanted to violate PHI, not because they wanted to do things the wrong way, but because our software didn't provide the opportunity for them to do what they needed to do. So they created a workaround, like most of us do when we use software that we don't understand fully. So it's important that we understand that so we can provide the right solution to help people do the right thing. So it's important to think about, I'm creating this product. What could go wrong? What if it's used by different people or the wrong people? What if it's used in a different context or another purpose than we originally intended it to be used? Who can access this design? And more importantly, who can't? So we've got a couple of best practices for responsible design. It's about helping us ensure that we're improving things rather than making them worse or flat out destroying them. I know I saw some cameras out, so I'm just going to throw this slide up for about 7 or 8 seconds. We're going to go through each one in depth, but I know that it's funny. You say 7 seconds, but there's always a 7-second delay first. I'll leave it for another. I'm a little thirsty again. So the first thing we need to do is prioritize usability. We need to understand how people intend to use their products and ensure that it meets their needs. We have an obligation as designers to create products that are intuitive, safe, free from possibly life-threatening errors. We need to design to accommodate users with a wide variety of diverse abilities, whether it be privacy, security, safety, that's equally available to all, and accommodate for individual preferences, such as, like I started with, right hand, left hand, when you get into ergonomics and how people use things. We have to be transparent and well-intentioned. We have to put the well-being of others before the place of our employment. We need to make sure that we're able to help people. Being able to help people feels great, and helping them, actually helping them, is the reward. Know that it's okay to question the current business model. It's okay to think about redesigning that business model or designing a new one. And again, as designers, when we think about the design process, when we think about something like the scientific method, it's okay to start with assumptions. But as designers, aside from being curious and inquisitive, and yes, they're kind of the same word, but slightly different, we need to know that what we put out there was our best guess, and that we're okay with it being wrong, so that we can learn from it, so that we can help people. We all hear data-driven all the time. 58, 712. Those are all pieces of data that don't mean shit. I can give you more. 400 Far Road, whatever. That's my address. Don't come there. I'm moving in like a month. So anyway, these pieces of data are worthless by themselves, even when more relevant. Data doesn't have a moral compass. Let's not be data-driven. Let's be data-informed, so that we can make better decisions that affect people that use our products. Let's tolerate mistakes. When somebody creates an error, when somebody's in a product of ours and something doesn't work, They should never feel like, wow, I screwed this up. What did I do wrong? We need to help them understand what they did wrong. Let them feel loved. Let them know that we can help them course correct and have the right outcome. And on top of that, aside from helping them learn from their mistakes, we want to learn from their mistakes as well. And then bring people to the center of your process. Work with them to understand their needs, whether they articulate to them to you, or you discover them and they're not articulated to them. As designers, identifying unarticulated needs is huge for us. Be empathetic to their situation. Develop a relationship with them so that you can work with them over time and continue to improve your product. We also have to embrace diversity. We heard her talk about that earlier, right? Be welcoming and encouraging of people who come from a diverse background, who might have a different perspective than you are, who come from a different culture. Make space at the table for people who come from who have underrepresented voices so that they can be heard. Diversity leads to better designs, better outcomes, better solutions, better products. Basically, diversity leads to better outcomes for everyone. Kim Goodwin says, worry less about design and more about human-centered decisions. So earlier I talked about how some of those technology issues, those breaches, might not have been the fault of design, or design might not have been able to do anything. But some of them very well could have been. These dark patterns that Facebook and Google are doing are having people not realize the privacy that they're giving up. Mike Montero says everyone remembers the monster, but they call him by his maker's name. Don't be the asshole that's name is associated with unsustainable, inaccessible, unethical, and irresponsible products. Thanks.